So after Gone Home came out, we knew we wanted to make another game. We knew we wanted to kind of progress further down the path that we started on with Gone Home. And originally we were going to make another game that was set in a very domestic location, very kind of like mundane setting about people that you might know in your everyday life. And the game is called Tacoma because it was originally going to be set in Tacoma, Washington.
For a time, we were like, this will be interesting. We get to research a whole other time period and, have different people at different times in their lives experiencing different things and having different artifacts in their houses. And eventually that started to pall a little bit, and Steve actually had a hilarious flash of insight.
In the middle of Crater Lake, there's an island called Wizard Island that my wife and I were hiking on, and I was talking to her about how I felt like, we had ideas for interesting mechanical things to kind of push ourselves further, but they were really refinements or kind of like digging deeper on stuff we had already done, and I felt like it was too close to what we had done with Gone Home, and we needed to push ourselves further, and we needed to push ourselves into a setting that we weren't familiar with, that we had to say, okay, we can't just dig back into a certain time period or things that we know, but we have to create a context for this game to take place in. But we needed the isolation of, something like the house in Gone Home, where it's like, you're there alone, it's the middle of the night, you can't leave, you have to find out what happened by being inside this space. It could be an Antarctic base, it could be a ship that's set adrift at sea, it could be like a space station. My wife was like, space station's cool. I'm like, space station is cool. So last time you saw Tacoma, more than a year ago now, it was set on Lunar Transfer Station Tacoma, but it had a very different purpose fictionally. It was kind of more of like an airport terminal for tourists that were going from Earth to the moon. We were making it kind of a grand space, an impressive construction that was meant to be kind of opulent and wow the very rich people who were taking a vacation on the moon. And that allowed us to do some things with gravity that were unique to being on a space station, to say transfer between surfaces and kind of use these magnetic boots to explore the environment from different angles that you wouldn't normally have access to. But it also meant that these had to be very kind of cavernous, grand spaces, which again aren't really what our games are about.
We ended up working against our strengths in various ways with the previous version, which involved things like being able to stand on different surfaces in the same space and stuff like that. But essentially that ended up mandating large, weird spaces that were fun to zip around in. And when you think about living in those spaces and what humans would do in there, there isn't much, and there isn't much certainly that fits well with our milieu. It wasn't everything it could be.
And so after after we first showed that game and let people get their hands on it, we realized that we needed to bring the spaces in and build Tacoma much more like a submarine, or much more like a ship on the ocean, where everything has to be pretty constrained and feel almost claustrophobic, while also the company that built it wants to make people feel as comfortable as they can be living there for a year or more at a time.
So when I started working on Tacoma, we hadn't yet sort of put in the interactive AR scenes. So at the time it was like you would come upon a scene and see the characters and watch this, sort of conversation event happening with these characters. And you could follow them around. And, it was interesting at the time. I was really excited, oh, you can walk over here and hear one conversation and then just hear someone say something on the other side of the room and be like, oh, okay, wait, I'm gonna go over there and I'll check out what these people are saying later, but I really wanna decide what part of this conversation I'm participating in. But, you kind of had to watch the whole thing through and then do it again. And there wasn't that kind of responsiveness.
We have awesome friends in the industry who play test for us, and we really trust their reactions to things and totally steer by them in a lot of situations. And I'm pretty sure it was one of them who was just like, man, I really just wanted to have control of this. And we were like, oh, right.
And from that, we really realized that we weren't pushing what we were doing far enough from what we had already done. We also realized that these characters and the three-dimensional digital recordings of them and what you could get out of being within those scenes had a whole game in it. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you put something supplemental into your game and then you realize, wait, this is what the game is really about.
Where now, you know, when you play an AR scene, you can kind of like be like, oh wait, I didn't hear that, and like rewind it a couple seconds and like try and take that moment in again and look at it in even more detail than I think you would if you knew you were just watching it sort of like from point A to point B. You have full control over it, so you're really engaging with this scene in a really granular way. And I think that level of agency over how you're participating in the story is really powerful.
It's hard to make that call, and it's hard to get to the point where it was worth making the call, because you know you actually like improve the game, you make the thing be what it needs to be. But you know, when you're in a situation like that, you either have the option to say, well, let's just finish what we have, it's not what we know it could be, but we just gotta lock it down, or you make it part of the job to say, how can we support getting this thing to actually be what we know it needs to be.
So when Tacoma comes out, which I'm very excited about, I hope that people will, you know, really see the attention to detail that everyone in the studio has put into this game, whether it's, you know, with the characters and really fleshing them out, and like even just like populating their bedroom with stuff that you would be like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. Like Evie would totally have this book, and like I can understand that by seeing what she does in her scenes and finding other things in her room.
We do have higher stakes than we might, but I hope that we can keep it so that you always understand and you can always like feel what the characters are feeling and just like get it.
You know, I really hope that we're able to give you an opportunity to get to know these characters as people. You know, I think that was what was at the heart of Gone Home, certainly, and Minerva's Den, was that through what you do as a player, through what we give you access to interactively, you can feel like you really knew these characters as if they were someone that you could have known in real life. You have a feeling for who they were, what they were like, what they went through. If through what we're doing with the evidence that people have left behind in the physical environment, if with what we're doing with the recordings of these moments that they experienced as individuals, we can get that feeling across of saying, even in this place that's like nowhere I've ever visited, I felt like these were real people that lived here and that they went through something that I can identify with, then hopefully we've done our job and made this an experience that's worth having.